My God, yes.
Check, check.
Thank you.
Press the button.
Can you guys hear me now? Awesome. I started working full time in the crypto space in 2017. I was at a hedge fund before that, and sort of my first aha moment was when I came across Bitcoin in 2013, of just the idea of a decentralized, non-government backed, natively digital currency kind of blew my mind for things like remittances and the developing world. And then fast forward to 2016, a year after the Ethereum blockchain launched, just the whole idea of digital ownership and what programmable smart contracts could allow and disrupt for every imaginable industry. And so sort of my perspective in the space today with amazing artists and builders and curators is sort of more from the tech side, more from the Web3 side, and building out some of those tech over the last 5 years and sort of building up the stack of where we are now and the adoption of the application level over the last 18 months of actually having blockchain-based assets like digital art and collectibles to play with and interact with.
Awesome. Hi, everyone. I'm so happy that the mics are working again because my voice is already a little hoarse, but nice to be here. My name is Sasha Stiles. I'm a poet. I'm also a visual artist and an artificial intelligence researcher. And I do a lot of work with natural language processing and generative text, which basically means working with AI, working with neural networks that put language together in ways that sound and behave human-esque. I've been writing poetry my entire life, mostly in a very conventional way. And over the past 10 years have really kind of shifted my practice to focus on using new media and really embodying a lot of the things that I write about have to do with post-human futures and with speculative technologies and how they're reshaping the human condition as we know it, and as human poets have been writing about it for millennia. So I do a lot of work incorporating new media into my work and using advanced tools like text generators, like motion graphics to create different kinds of experiences for poetry. I am the author of a book called Technology, which is a hybrid art and poetry book that is co-written with, thank you for popping that up there, which is co-written by my AI alter ego, a text generator that I've been training on my poetry for about 5-6 years now. And I'm also co-founder of a poetry gallery that exists in the NFT space called the Verse, which I co-founded with two amazing writers, Ana Maria Caballero and Callan Iwamoto, and we're dedicated to exploring the potential of literary NFTs in this space, looking at blockchain's potential for writers and how we can use NFTs to really empower poets in particular and push the limits of language. And just really quickly, I think the moment that sort of broke all this open for me is that I'd been sort of self-publishing a lot of my digital poetry on Instagram for years, not knowing what else to do with it, and started to get invited by curators to participate in new media shows. And then in 2020, I was commissioned to write a poem for a show that was happening in the metaverse. And that was the first time I'd been asked to do something like that. So I got involved in that show and met a whole bunch of crypto artists and folks who were already making art and presenting art in the metaverse. And it just made me realize, there was a huge arena for me to play in there. And I didn't see many writers, so I dove in and I have not looked back since.
Lovely. Hi, everyone. My name is Sam. My background was working in the traditional art world in a curatorial capacity at a number of different organizations, mainly here in the UK, also in the US. About 2 years ago, I found myself tripping up and falling in the NFT space, and not quite sure how it happened, but I'll maybe try and explain at the end. And since then, I've done a whole range of different things, been involved in different types of initiatives. I quite soon after entering this world, co-founded a NFT curation platform called JPG, which was a platform where you could go and curate exhibitions of NFTs that you admired, not necessarily just ones that you owned, and create narrative and context around those works. I also, at around the same time, joined a decentralized organization called Fingerprints DAO, which is a collection of artwork collectively owned by over 200 people, and specifically artwork that seeks to use blockchain technology as a new artistic medium in its own right, rather than just a new medium of commerce and exchange. So my role there was as the chair of the curation committee, developing a kind of framework for how we could think about blockchain as medium in some way, and overseeing the collection, acquisitions, and also working with artists on new projects that sort of did that. And more recently, and a lot of my time now is spent working on a completely different kind of project called Fanilia. And Fanilia is a project of NFTs, which are these very, very cute digital creatures whose emotions respond to the ups and downs of different crypto assets. Fanilia was born as a conceptual artwork by a British artist called Ed Fornieles, artist of the kind of post-internet generation. And together we've turned it into this kind of NFT universe, and we're continuing to develop that together with another bigger team. My aha moment, I'm not really sure. I got involved 2 years ago, as I said, and I wanted to learn by doing rather than just by kind of reading. And so I spoke with an artist who made work that I thought would be appropriate for the sort of NFT form one way or another. And then I went onto Twitter. I identified about 200 people who clearly bought these things called NFTs, and I DM'd them all on Twitter. And 95% of them ignored my messages. But the 5% that did then turned out to be great collaborators and friends and all the rest of it. And so I got involved very quickly just through doing the very impolite thing. So I recommend anybody who wants to get involved does that.
Hi, everyone. My name is Nicole. I co-founded VerticalCrypto Art about 2.5 years ago with really, it was quite similar to Sam, actually. Like the way I got into NFTs was through art. I have a lot of friends in the art world who maybe never really made it into the art world, and have been exploring blockchain and NFTs as a medium for them to sell their work. And one of these good friends of mine introduced me to this whole world. And for the longest time, I completely ignored him. And then when COVID hit and I was quite bored at home, doing a very corporate job, I was in Facebook and Instagram for like 6 years. And I found myself much more interested in this ecosystem, and actually started learning a lot and finding out, like listening to kind of like Vitalik podcasts on like YouTube, and reading like stuff about Bitcoin, and just like getting really into the whole idea of like decentralization and cryptocurrencies and what that meant for the world in general, not just for the art ecosystem. And yeah, that then kind of fell quite deep into the rabbit hole and saw an opportunity or a space for curation and bringing up artists that maybe are not necessarily considered artists with a capital A from like the traditional art world. And that's how VerticalCrypto Art started. Very much, we have music. Very much as a curatorial platform, and from there it kind of developed to what it is now, which I'm still quite have trouble defining. So I will avoid the definition of VerticalCrypto Art.
Thanks so much for the introductions. I think it's really great that you also picked the word culture when talking about sort of like the direction we're taking, because another word that we often use is community. And I think all of us sort of like are beginning to have community fatigue. And culture is a really good umbrella term, which encompasses community, but also like several other things like oral narratives, traditions. And I think we see our own forms of cultural aspects being formed within the digital space. And all of us are coming at it from a different angle. Whether sort of like we're building the infrastructure to power it, whether we're directly writing the narrative of it, whether we're creating a project, or we're encouraging events like this to happen. And so before we sort of like dive into the future, maybe I'd love to hear your thoughts about sort of like what defines a community, or to avoid definitions, maybe like some of the elements that you see of the culture of Web3 that we're talking about right now, and like how do you see your role within that? And anyone can jump in because we're just ranting. No formal order.
Happy to take a stab. Open-ended question. I'm going to stick with the question of with the culture of Web3 at least, and where it is now, and I think where it's headed. But sort of there, it's. I like taking a step back and realizing that a lot of the stuff we're talking about, NFT, digital art, and almost like increasingly NFT is this term that doesn't really serve what we're trying to talk about when it comes to digital art or digital collectibles or digital poetry, because all that the blockchain really allows you to do is own a digital thing for the first time that's unique. Because we spend a lot of our time on a daily basis in the digital realm. I spend probably 10 to 15 hours a day in the digital world between my online remote work and my e-commerce and my play and my socializing and gaming. Like, it's all online increasingly, all of that. But none of that in a day-to-day life we own. And that's all that sort of blockchain allows us to do. And so for a while in the crypto Web3 industry, before we even called it that, all that you could do was buy or sell the tokens. You could buy crypto, so you could buy Bitcoin, you could sell Bitcoin, you could buy ETH, you could sell ETH. And a very small amount of the population actually enjoys or is good at trading. And then finally about early 2020, you could do things with those assets if you held them, with those tokens. And that was sort of the beginning of DeFi. So people that had a lot of crypto assets previously could now hold on to their ETH and provide liquidity into a finance protocol and get paid yield in return. So it got a little bit interesting. And then, because the asset prices all rose at the beginning of 2 years ago, you had kind of what I would describe as a crypto nouveau riche population. And that any population that has sudden wealth creation, like tale as old as time, acts very predictably. They have dispensable income for the first time. They start buying luxury goods. They may buy a second home or a car or start collecting fine art for the first time. But for this particular demographic, a lot of their wealth and their assets were in crypto. And so they looked around the room and said, what can I spend my crypto assets on? And they said, amazing, digital art, digital collectibles. And so in the beginning, it was all kind of the same people. It was the same active wallets that had been early in the ecosystem that then kind of got excited about DeFi, then got excited about digital art and collecting digital art. And then the community totally morphed and fragmented. And the digital art NFT community has become something entirely different than what it was born in the beginning. There's still a bunch of core actors that have untold wealth within crypto because they got in really early and this is their world and they have 100% of their portfolio in this industry. But now, finally, there's something that artists can kind of pick up and not know about the code, but quite quickly get and see how it can change how they connect with their collectors, how they connect with their digital fans, how they connect with their community. And so I think the perfect time to maybe pass it off to you guys who are artists and curators and collectors that have kind of what I would say become part of that that generation we've seen in the last 2 years of DAOs and community-driven collection, community ownership around this, and relationship to your fans and your supporters in a whole new way.
Wow, there's a lot there. Well, I'll speak to the question, I guess, from my point of view as a writer. So I think it probably comes as no great surprise that a lot of the traditional writing community is not very tech savvy, at least in my experience. So a lot of the work that I've been doing over the past 2 years has been sort of explaining what it is that I find so compelling about Web3 for writers and for editors and publishing and everyone in this ecosystem, because it's not been an organic shift over the way that we've seen, I think, a little bit more with art. It's been a lot of very, laborious onboarding of, each poet sort of one by one. And I think how I tend to sort of break it down for myself, and when I'm explaining this to friends who are writers, I think about sort of the 3 C's, because I'm a poet and I like alliteration. I think about 3 C's. So one is creativity, one is community, and then one is currency. So I think for me, and this is the biggest one, the Web3 culture is really unlocking new realms of creativity for what it means to be a writer, for what it means to work with words. And that's true in everything from the kind of tools that we're able to use, like AI-powered text generators that kind of act as an augmented imagination and help address everything from writer's block to turbocharging your free writing and things like that, to being able to publish things in ways that no print magazine and no Web2 magazine ever could publish something. So that in turn, that kind of innovation with file formats and the vessel for a poem doesn't just, change kind of the end product. It changes the writerly imagination. It changes how we're thinking about language and poetry and literature and readership and authorship and originality. So I think there's, for me, like, this is the most exciting part of Web3 culture for me as a poet, is thinking through all those ideas and really looking at how Web3 can unlock creativity in my practice in a way that I couldn't have done in any other way. And then I think, for communities, since, we're kind of defining that word maybe against culture a little bit, again, I think I see the value of Web3 as really bringing together many, many communities in lots of different ways and creating a lot of places where these Venn diagrams intersect. And for me, for example, I'm coming from an AI space, a sort of more general tech space, a literature space, an academic space. Now I'm coming from a Web3 entrepreneurship space with the Verse. All these different sort of arenas that I think in a traditional world wouldn't necessarily intersect, now are coming together. And so I'm able to find a place for myself as a poet who's writing with an AI co-author who publishes a physical book, but it's also publishing media-rich texts in ways that are very different, and thinking about the evolution of publishing and the future of literature. So that's all very exciting as well, just the way those communities can really enrich what it means to write and be part of a culture of writers. And then the last thing is just thinking about currency. And, obviously there's the literal thinking about what cryptocurrency means, but I feel like, again, as poets, we kind of like to find all the layered meanings in a word. And I think, in Web3, currency isn't just about the exchange of money. It's about the exchange of power. It's about the exchange of value. It's about what you bring attention to and meaning to. It's about amplifying things that deserve to be heard. So I think that's a big part of it too, is how can we use Web3 and all these tools to take something as we know it's intrinsically meaningful as poetry and actually give it more resonance and more cultural value and more presence in everyday life and make it accessible for people who might not ordinarily want to seek it out or want to spend time with it. So giving poetry more currency, and I think that probably holds true for a lot of different genres of creative work on the blockchain.
Sam, do you have something to add, like from the angle of, if we're talking about cryptocurrency and the commercial aspect and the cultural aspect, like, is there a dissonance, or are they sort of like complementing each other? Like, because as Sasha highlighted and Camilla, that people come from different angles into the same space, and sort of like, how do they interact, like from your observation?
I mean, one thing that I find fascinating about the crypto space, especially as it manifests online on platforms like Twitter and Discord, is, it's a melting pot of people from all around the world and from many different backgrounds. But it's really the fact that it's this kind of big live action role play. It's like, it's all one ridiculous kind of game. At least half the people are pseudonymous, go by, fake names and, wear cartoon profile pictures. You don't really know who they are. It's amazing the number of times my people close to me in my personal life have said, you're going into business with them, you've never met them, you don't know their name, you don't know their age. It's true. It's kind of bizarre, and it probably one day will go wrong. But there is this kind of culture of trust, which is really interesting, that there's such a strong culture of trust around a technology whose sort of like chief supposed kind of benefit is that it's a trustless technology. I don't know if I can speak that much more deeply to the coming together of different communities, other than to say that I have come into contact with so many people that I never would have otherwise, and found so much common ground with them, and learned so much, and thought about the practice of curating and even working with artists to make art in new ways that I would never have thought about previously. One thing that maybe I can say that I always think is interesting on this question of culture versus community, or how culture can actually kind of be community, is the way that the sort of, if you think of NFTs rather than just being a new way to commodify things, as a new way also to distribute things, and to distribute things at scale. And you look at this kind of model that's emerged through these famous, or maybe I should say infamous, collectibles projects like Bored Apes and CryptoPunks. You have these collections of 10,000 or 20,000 assets. And working with artists who want to try and convert what they do as traditional artists maybe or not, but people who are accustomed to creating single images and trying to scale that out, distribute that to a much larger audience, I think is really fascinating. And I think it's been really fulfilling for people I've worked with. And the way that I see it is kind of like in the conventional art world, as an artist, your collectors are your collectors. There's a handful of them. There's probably only, at the top of the market, only a handful of people who even have the means to purchase your work. And in NFT, your collectors are your fans. It's like a fan relationship. Selling an NFT for Ed, the artist I'm working with on Familiar, he's one of these traditional artists. He's just released a project with 10,000 pieces in it. And for him, selling a Familiar NFT, one of 10,000, is more like being a musician back in the day, maybe, when you'd sell an album, right, rather than selling a painting. And I think that's a really interesting kind of change. And there's a greater intimacy there between creator and collector, and there's also a greater feedback loop as well.
I love that. I love trust in a trustless environment. That's a good quote. Nicole, you have a background working for sort of like a big corp, and then you completely became at the grassroots of a lot of things that happened over the last couple of years. And you have a very strong sort of like acumen towards social media and the building communities around it. And you have your personal vertical crypto, the residency, and it must be a lot of work. But how do you find sort of like balance among all of that? And how does that translate to the culture you're nurturing? Or if you don't find balance, what are you nurturing your community towards?
Yeah, no, I think, first of all, everything that you guys just said is really interesting. And I definitely resonate a lot with what Sasha said about the Venn diagrams coming together, because it's actually what I see very much in my day to day. And like, even with what we do with like vertical crypto art is really like coming together with a lot of different parts and people. Like in a way, you know, even me myself, like, yes, I work as a curator, but actually I'm also a collector because I collect art. But actually I also like work on the education piece with the residency with a lot of artists. And sometimes I even try to make art myself. Like, you kind of like have this almost like 360 persona in this culture and like community where you can be a lot of different things in any given time. And I think that's probably mostly how I would define Web3 culture, like trying to not define it, like having this sort of like very fluid state of being many different things. That's kind of like what I would define as a culture. But also, I think there's a flip side to that, which maybe like Sam touched on a little bit, is the money side of things, because I think we can't really kind of like, be oblivious to it. Like a lot of the culture, or I guess what you see online of how Web3 is being communicated or how NFTs are being communicated, especially in the outside bubble of not your like Twitter circle, is very much led by money and by capital. And the projects that you hear about a lot, such as Bored Apes or CryptoPunks or many others, are because of the very high, amounts of money that they generated or sales and whatever. So I think like that is, I guess, a flip side to like Web3 culture that I personally don't enjoy that much. And I think it's good to talk about it because it is there. Like realistically, we are in a market because the ecosystem is a market. It's driven by cryptocurrencies, and so also like balancing that idea that you're constantly talking to a market whilst also talking to artists about art and culture is how I definitely don't balance myself in what I do.
It's really great how you touch upon commercial elements because I know, Sam, you have a background in sort of like traditional art world, so you can compare the dynamics between the two. And we see a lot right now, traditional galleries entering the space, and they're using various techniques to approach the community. And sometimes they follow the culture, sometimes they don't. Do you see overall like they're pursuing successful strategies, or do you think like maybe there's some advice like you would potentially give anyone here who works for a traditional gallery?
Yeah, I speak to a lot of people who come from the traditional art world and want to know how they can get involved. And I welcome it. I certainly am not somebody who's kind of says, no, this is like our space and you're not allowed here and this is, a revolution and whatever. I think the main thing I would say about successful strategies is that I think there has to be a recognition that you cannot just kind of import your traditional, your existing outside reputation as a gallerist or as an artist and, walk into this new market where people may not have ever heard of you and kind of act arrogantly. The second thing I would feel, which actually has become a bit of a frustration for me, speaking with people who are coming into the space from outside, from the art world, is absolutely no real effort to bring their existing clientele into the market, right? So it's kind of like this somewhat complacent attitude that they can come in and there's loads of money here and there's enough money for them and people are just going to buy what they release. And it's just simply not true. It's not correct. And when I ask them, so do you have existing clients who've shown interest? They always avoid the question and they very clearly don't. And I understand that it's difficult. And I understand that they are not alone responsible for educating people. But I do think that there has to be an effort because as somebody in the inside, you're not going to respect the people coming in from the outside. You're not going to buy their wares, as it were, if you don't see them making a sincere effort to engage in the culture that you're part of. So that's the main thing I would say.
And also to sort of touch on what both of you said, so as Nicole pointed out, it's sort of impossible to separate the moneyness from it the same way that it is in the traditional art world. It's just the market in this, when they're natively digital assets, is just so liquid and transparent and easily accessible. And so all of that obfuscation gets taken out of the broker and the auction house and everything else. It's so immediate. The relationship is so direct. And so especially in the last 18 months, it's been hugely speculative. And so there will always be, there is a market for it. That's the nature of these assets and these goods, is that they're infinitely sort of transferable and you can build these marketplaces and see all the history and the provenance, what they sold for before and all of that. But I think a lot of the sort of the crazy headlines you're seeing, the part that, the artists really innovating in this space sort of have a visceral reaction against. And a lot of people that have come into the space and have read the headlines, because the understanding, I'd say, is kind of reached the zeitgeist. Awareness, rather, of everyone reading that headline. A JPEG of a monkey sells for £1 million, and you kind of want to hate that. But I'd say because awareness is there, at every major publication around the world, there's a beat reporter covering NFTs or crypto culture or NFT art or whatever the hybrid is of all this stuff coming together. But I'd say understanding of actually what's happening and what you can do with the tech, especially using all parts of the animal and bringing in new technologies like AI, new ownership experiences like the DAO co-owning collective art collection model, that's much smaller. And so, the moneyness element of it is just part of what any market is. And I think certainly for the work that we've been doing with Sotheby's in the last year and a half to bring them to this space, they fully get it. Like Sebastian Fahey was speaking earlier today, who's the director of EMEA, and even Charlie Stewart, their CEO, they fully understand the power of this technology, not just as a new canvas and a new medium for all forms of art, but as a new way to sort of make art rather than an asset as it's always been, but the potential to make art into an asset class within itself, because it's so sort of understandable now and easy to transact with.
I actually have one more question, Camilla, for you. You're working with tech, so at the forefront of what's going. So you sometimes know what's going to be released and the timeline. And since we're talking about the future, whatever you can share, what are your sort of opinion about where is the art and culture going right now based on the work you do?
This is when we ask for what's called alpha in the crypto world.
Exactly.
What I can say is that, so of all the major brands that we've been working with Sotheby's for the longest amount of time.
Just move your mic.
Oh, can you guys, there we go. We're working with Sotheby's for the longest amount of time. And we first worked with them to set up, the site and the ability to sell these high value, amazing digital art pieces. They've done a couple sales now, curated sales. They even did a collector curated sale where Fingerprints curated. I'm a member of Pleaser DAO. We put a piece forward. And they similar to what you were saying, Sam, which I love, is we're really thoughtful about when we enter this space, we need to help use, our Sotheby's brand and our 300-year-old legacy of being an auction house to help bring attention and elevate this space because they see the potential in it. And they really wanted to do it in a way that was sort of supportive of the entire industry to shine a light on what was happening rather than being value extractive. As you were saying, some people who entered this space are. Because those big pools of capital are usually coming from within the Web3 native space, which is a very different target audience than the new joiners, the traditional contemporary collectors who are setting up a crypto wallet for the first time and buying their first NFT, in the last year. That's very different. And so they said, it's important to us to bring our contemporary and do the education and bring our collectors into this space and help hold their hand through the process. From sort of two things I'll share when we look to the future. First of all, as I think everyone in this room can empathize with, the Web3 user experience right now is terrible. We've all gone through that of either ourselves or telling a friend, it's really easy, buy your first NFT. Connect your bank account to Coinbase or Kraken or whatever it is, buy usually ETH or USDC or whatever the token of the platform is. Download that browser or that plugin on your browser, go to the marketplace, try to make a trade. Ooh, it might fail, but you're not going to get that money back. And if it's a high sort of excitement mint, you might just get front run because someone paid more transaction fee than you did and lose out entirely. And so I sometimes joke that from like a tech perspective and from a user journey perspective, it's like the whole art community came to a house party that they'd heard about that wasn't yet set up for hundreds of thousands and millions of people to come to. Like your stuff might get stolen. There's no bartender. The beer's warm. You don't have a safe ride home. Like it's just not at the robustness and the level that you would expect for mass adoption and hundreds of millions of users. So that sort of in the longer term is what's coming next. And now that the market has calmed down a bit and become just less frenetic and in some ways stupid, a lot of teams are trying to build out that really elegant user experience. So next time sort of the invites get sent out to this party, it'll be, beautifully catered, great music, very safe, trustworthy hosts. And I think what we see with the work with Sotheby's is we set this up, as I was saying, for them to transact in these high value new medium. But very quickly, that Web 2.5 step that a lot of brands take to pay in with credit card and sort of it's not fully on chain, that they very quickly all, faster than I anticipated, go fully Web3 because they see the benefits of things like artist royalties that are programmably payable and all the benefits of what it means to sort of really transact on chain and bring other parts of their internal business, whether it's their cataloging, their sales, their management of it, fully on chain. And so that's what we're sort of seeing with a lot of traditional art institutions. We did Pace Gallery's sale recently as well, and sort of a similar experience is they dip a toe in, they try to transact in it, and then they really get it. And then they sort of think, okay, what else from our business, from our physical painting sales can we bring into this?
I think Pace definitely has been really active entering the space and working with digital artists. And back to your house party comments, I think one thing that we saw at every house party was the amount of rugs. That was definitely very cozy. How much time do we, you got it. How much time do we have in case we want to leave some room for questions? Do we have one more question? Okay, perfect. I'll ask. I wanted to ask one more question to Sasha because I've been following the Verse for ever since your first launch, and I know you also have that sort of like vision of poem equals a work of art, and I know that it's sort of a challenge to translate something in the written form, especially when visual has been performing so well. So what I've noticed is you always found ways for your every new series to creatively engage both visual, both technological, and written forms to create something new. So you had was it Gen Text when you collaborated with an AI, with a poet and a visual artist. And I think from an art perspective, you would be a really great person to ask, like, which direction are we going? And sort of like your forecast for the future for art.
Well, I think a lot about it, obviously, from the writer's point of view. And so I think I've seen what's happened with art, and I've been watching it both as an artist, but also kind of as an observer thinking, well, this is really interesting for the art scene and for artists that I know, but I think this could be really interesting for the writers that I know and the editors that I know and the publishing houses that I work with. And we're off to I think a pretty slow start, to be honest, with writing NFTs right now. But that means, we have a lot of time to build and really think about what we're going to do meaningfully. But I spend a lot of time thinking about what the future of literature will look like and what the future of publishing will be. And, having just gone through the process of releasing a physical book last year, it's given me a whole new appreciation for what it could mean to be able to publish things on the blockchain, really be able to think about new formats for books, new formats for language, really kind of ideating what it could be like to create an experience that goes much further than an audiobook or a Kindle or something, but really, really kind of at once propels literature forward while also nodding back to the origins of storytelling in the oral tradition and in immersive performance and artistry. So I think that's where I'm really sort of, that's where my head's at most days, is thinking about what that might look like. Not just publishing a PDF of a book on the blockchain, as an NFT book, but what can writers and coders and developers do together to really invent new formats? And to put it in context, because it sounds a little abstract, but I think also a lot about things like the invention of the Gutenberg printing press and how profoundly that changed not just distribution, but how that changed, how we thought about literature and the way people wrote and how many people had access to information on a daily basis and things like that. So I'm really committed to thinking a lot about this, not just from an aesthetic standpoint, but also because I think this is a really important technology for a lot of people that have things to say that have not had a platform to say them on. So I think a huge part of what I'm doing, both at the Verse and personally, is doing this kind of onboarding and really building community, and literally going from workshop to publishing house to literary journal, and kind of giving a little pitch on why I think this is important, why it's not just like a little kind of poetic hobby, but why this is actually really means more than that. And it's been really fulfilling to do that. It's a lot of hard work, and there is no balance, as Nicole was saying, but it's incredibly exciting to do it.
Yeah, maybe the future of arts and culture of Web3 is finding balance. So one final question, Nicole, I wanted to ask you, because you speak to a lot of artists, and you obviously have to take into account the commercial sides, but also what fits the culture. Is there any trends you see that are coming that are new to the space?
Wow, that's a big question. You're really looking for alpha here. I actually, to be honest, it's kind of funny because I think the way that I and we kind of curate in a way is almost trying not to go against the trends, but trying not to follow the trends that are very popular to follow in Web3. So, you have these spikes of everybody loves generative art and suddenly everyone is a coder, right? And everybody's doing generative art. And then you have the spikes of everybody loves net art, which still hasn't happened. I hope it happens because I love net art. But, there's these really big kind of, trends that happen that I think in a way don't help artists and actually don't help the culture, because the culture needs variety and needs differentiation and needs diversification. And so what I personally like to do is actually bring in a variety and a mix of artists and practices and people and backgrounds together in group shows, in conversations, in events, and even today, it wasn't just about art. We talked about music and fashion. So I think the idea of not kind of focusing so much on a single trend is what we value a lot and try to do. Having said that, I do think there is definitely a shift that I'm seeing and also hoping to see as well in more of the digital fashion side of things. I think a lot of creators and artists that work and mix their 3D native skills with fashion are extremely interesting, and it's a space that hasn't really been explored yet.
Sam J, who's one of the artists that is exhibited in the group show downstairs, is, I think, one of the artists that does it brilliantly and really like blends these two. So I hope to see that more. And I think there's many, many creators and artists that are doing really amazing work in that space. And seeing, things like Gucci Vault, for example, and kind of like bigger brands coming in and tapping into these independent creators is how I hope the culture continues as well. Not just, big brands coming in and eating up, but actually big brands coming in because it's good that they come in and bringing in more of the independent culture of Web3 with them as well.
It's for sure we're not fortune tellers to tell you about the future. So I hope no one came here thinking we're going to predict the next wave. But I think by understanding where we're at right now, it gives us a much more educated perspective into where this is headed. And I think we have some time for questions. Yeah, you're first.
So I've actually
one second. There's the mic, yeah.
Thank you. This is more targeted at Camilla, but everyone can understand it or can dive in. I have a far more cynical view about why the Sotheby's and the Christie's are getting in there. I think it has, in order of priority, money, the fact that they're getting a new demographic, into this art world that they never had access to, and last, and like a distant last, is the art. And I'm wondering, are you or do you guys, as people that are enabling their entry into this market, do you guys have the power to actually push back to them and say, you know what, there's a whole bunch of ideas that shape your world that are frankly irrelevant now, right? And I mean, I'll give you an example. I think it's not often an artist is expected to know the history of art, in order to kind of be considered, not relevant.
There's a lot of people that would disagree with you on that.
No,
the artists need to know the history of art.
Yeah, well, but my point is,
great question.
My point is, this is a great debate to be had. Yeah. I mean, I think you'd have a lot of people in the traditional art world that say, all digital art is bullshit because these guys know nothing about the history of art. And I would argue, well, so what? But my question to you is, while you're enabling these guys to come in, do you have the power to push back and say, hey guys, there's a lot of crap in your world that we don't want in our world?
So, and it's a great question. I think, I would start my answer broadly and then come to Sotheby's specifically. So with pretty much every major Fortune 500 brand, every major brand with pick an industry, automotive, all the top names have done a project, fashion, art, all the major auction houses and major galleries are in, artists, even the two biggest living, Koons and Hearst, have done projects in this space. Every single brand, Adidas did probably one of the most successful sales. I think now with initial and royalties, they've made over 23 million. So every single brand has explored this space. Most have done a project already. And when we've spoken to a lot of them. And when you talk to these brands about what are their goals in this space, you get very different answers. Sometimes it's dollar signs. They think honeypot, crypto nouveau riche, the group we talked about. Great. How do we sell something to these weird internet idiots? Some think innovation theater, that they have some metaverse 2023 OKR. It's tied to their job performance. They need to be in this space because everyone is, and it's how they court the new Gen Z consumer. And then some really get it. Usually it's sort of an internal flag carrier that's been playing around with these things, and they really understand the potential for their brand to interact with the digital community in an entirely new way. Because brands with big digital followings, or individuals or creators or artists, if you have 5 million followers on Instagram or on Twitter and you're a beloved artist, the only way to monetize that following is to sell them something, like your product line or your art or whatever, or sell your following to advertisers. And no one loves that. I mean, it's the only way people with a following can really get money. But in this way, it's a new way to sort of monetize a digital community. And so we're seeing across the board, the answers for why they're getting into the space. And there's no good answer or bad. I personally, of course, support the third because I come from the industry, so I really care about long-term adoption and making it be in the way in the world that we all, I think, are attracted to. Decentralized ownership, decentralized value transfer, token-based economies, and the power of that. For Sotheby's, I think that aspect of every brand exploring this space, because it's where the new consumer lives and cares about, I think, is unanimously true. Even without NFTs, millennial art sales within the millennial demographic, mostly online. COVID obviously, sent that skyrocketing, but even before COVID, it was trending very much in that direction. To have these sales be online, but have them be natively digital assets, that's new. One of the most recent sales that Sotheby's did was the Sebastian Salgado sale, probably the most celebrated photographer of our living generation. I mean, I think he's heading into his 80s now or 70s now. Amazing photographer, mostly of the Amazon, Brazilian photographer. And for photography, it's a medium that makes perfect sense. And so Sotheby's is very excited to sort of elevate the medium in that way, bring photography into the level of fine art, because you can actually own it and see that the photographer doesn't have to go through marketing jujitsu to say, I promise I won't print more. You can't download a high-res version online and frame it and claim it's Mary Testino. And so they really see for certain industries, they did a generative curation recently with new generative artists like Ike Shells, all the way back to generative artists from the 1960s, where the mediums first became. And so I think in that space, I would give them more credit than at the dialogue they're trying to build and the categories they're trying to define within the art space. Because a lot of people just say NFTs, and they synonymize that with art. And with art, they lump in poetry and collectible projects like Punks and Apes, and photography, and generative art, and beautiful one-of-one. It's all kind of in a basket. And so they're trying to sort of make the distinctions and make the creations. But at the end of the day, they're a business. They're not a charitable organization. And so, the volume that they've had and experienced in sales certainly helps them continue to reinvest in what they're building and reinvest in this market. But I don't think bringing in the money element or having brands profit in a way from building this is inherently evil.
No,
would be my long-winded answer.
I didn't mean to suggest that.
Yeah. Do we have any more questions? Oh, could you pass the mic?
Hi, well, I'm an artist and I'm trying to creep into this. I'm not really very new to it all, so I have no idea what any of you are talking about. But basically, if I've got an animation, for example, that I like and I want to sell, how do I create a digital contract? I mean, how do I persuade somebody to write a digital contract that will pay me royalties every time it's sold in the future?
I would love to hear your opinion as an artist as well, if you're to answer this question. But I think from a technical perspective, there's a lot of platforms out there where you can mint your art, from OpenSea to more curated platforms. What sort of, now putting my Mojito hat on, what we'd love to see is sort of what we've been building custom for enterprises to allow a no-code creator solution. So any artist can put their own, almost their own website with their own NFT commerce for it to sell your own art on your own terms, with your own content and your own presentation in your own way. But right now it is quite easy to not know anything about code, go to some of these platforms and mint your art and connect with your community. Those platforms will help you, especially the curated ones, will help you program your own royalties at the token contract level.
Yeah.
It is sort of a frustrating shortcoming of these token standards that it's not necessarily enforceable across the board. So it's up to the marketplace if they want to enforce creator royalties or not. So OpenSea does. They support creator royalties, I think up to 1 royalty wallet. You could, in theory, have infinite royalty wallets. So every time a transaction's done, 10 people get paid, if that's how you want to program it. So OpenSea supports 1 royalty wallet. Recently, other big marketplaces, decentralized marketplaces like LooksRare, made it optional. A new one that just launched, Blur, also made it optional. So, which I think is just completely counterintuitive to what this tech is all about and what it does. But unfortunately, it's up to the sort of the good actors and the stewards out there to support the token contract. A lot is being innovated on token contracts and those standards. And I think at the moment it's being community policed. But to answer your question, sorry, as an artist, there are no code easy ways to to get up there, set your royalties, mint your NFTs. Minting on the blockchain is the easy part. Getting it in front of an audience, whether it's the Web3 native audience or your existing audience, there's friction on both sides. You know, your existing collector audience, again, the user journey in crypto, not so great. The Web3 native audience which has largely been driven by the speculation side, you know, you need to do the things like the community building, be active on Twitter, be active on Telegram, be active on Discord, because that's where it is now, at least, in its tiny little sort of subculture microcosm at the moment.
I'm just gonna add, like, if this is all new for you, the best I would advise is maybe just follow other artists and buy from them. Tezos is a very affordable platform, like blockchain with many different marketplaces that I personally, when I started my journey, I first collected before minting work, like for $1-2. And then it kind of like, you learn about the process. So it's like one of the best ways. And also Vertical Crypto has an artist residency. And I think, Nicole, you can speak more when is the next application process, because I think that's really helpful as well.
Yeah, it's coming up in mid-November, actually. What days are we? Yeah, today's the 2nd, sorry. So mid-November, we do an open call for our artist residency. But actually, like all of the content, all of the classes, all of the workshops that our resident artists get, they're online and they're available on our YouTube channel for everybody for free. So there's really a lot of information on like, what is crypto art? What is a smart contract? How to build your own smart contract? How to market yourself in like the Web3 Twitter ecosystem. There's like over 60 classes, so you can start digging in, and I'm sure you won't be bored.
No pressure. Any final questions before we close? 3, 2, 1. Okay, thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you, Alex. Thank you so much. Just a quick one. There's going to be a live audiovisual performance by Portrait XO happening at 7, just downstairs and behind like the LED wall that you saw. And there's drinks served downstairs as well.